Hi, everyone. Hey, buddy. Welcome. It's going to be a great night. I'm excited to be here with my friend Paul. What'd you think of that song?
Perfect.
We got a theme song.
Yes, we got a
Kenny
theme song.
Chesney's The Noise Song. And how about the line that says, "Sometimes I wonder, how did we get here? Seems like all we ever hear is noise." And I said, well, we're going to talk about that, but that's how this stuff kind of sneaks up on you. So kind of nice to have a theme song, huh? Fun. Got to have some fun. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Go ahead and give us some shouts out on that chat. I see some. We got Colorado, and it looks like we've got quite a few folks kicking in here. Paul, you're really popular, buddy.
I'm excited about
Yeah,
it.
this got a lot of interest. Once again, I want to thank Purina and Ray Vogt, Carl Gunzer, and the gang over there for supporting this series. It's been very popular, and I just get great people like Paul to sit down and spend an evening talking. So, but excited about that. And tonight, well, we're going to talk about the noise issue. And I was really, well, Paul and I had lunch just down the street here, and he said, I'm going to talk about noise. And I went like, holy smokes, nobody ever wants to talk about that. That's the elephant in the room talk. So we had some great talks, and we're going to share that with you tonight. With that being said, well, I've been working really hard on this and also on a course about basics. And the reason I want to bring it up here is because so much of what we're going to talk about is that early formative stage and trying to not let bad habits get developed. And well, I've got a little video here that's just going to talk a little bit about that. I'll expand on that and we'll dive right into everything else. So
there's nothing that makes it more difficult to advance a dog than a dog that isn't properly prepared in basics. There's something I learned over the course of my career running all-age dogs. I think that it's essential for advanced trainers to understand and do basics dogs. And I also think that it's essential for basics trainers to understand and run all-age dogs or advanced dogs, because you need to know where you need to get to as a basics trainer, and you need to know where you came from as an advanced trainer. So when you have that understanding of what it takes to get there, and then what it needs to look like when it's there, then I think you have really the great combination of training. There's no doubt in my mind the single biggest stumbling block in people advancing dogs is incomplete basics. And it's not just the steps, folks. Everybody's worried about the laundry list or the shopping list of steps. It's the principles. We just finished working a dog on 8-handed casting drill. Now he's deep into basics, but exposing this dog to a little bit of confusion and uncertainty and getting him to function and think through it, that's the real beauty of basics. This dog is becoming more resilient to making mistakes, not lack of effort, not being a bad dog, just making an error, an honest mistake. Oh, I didn't understand. He didn't fall apart, he kept trying. That's the beauty of a well-prepared basics dog. They're resilient. There's a mental toughness factor. They're not going to fall apart when some adversity strikes, because adversity is going to happen. And if you do a great job in basics, you don't have to train the rest of your life in fear of addressing issues. You can confront things when they happen without the house caving in on you. So we'll talk more about it. But basics, essential stuff, and I can't talk enough about it. Thank you.
well, I've just finished, well, the course isn't done. It's going to be out later this fall. it's going to be somewhere around 75 videos. I'm over 10 hours of edited footage. I mean, I followed 3 dogs from start to finish every day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's going to be a pretty good course because it's not just dogs that are through basics. It's dogs going through basics. And so anyways, I hope it's something you'll hear more about it. And I don't want to dwell any more on that, but I just thought maybe it would be a good time to, well, launch in our morning talk or evening talk about the noise. And this is part of basics, just those early behavioral things. The Q&A box is to ask questions. And we're going to handle questions like we do in a lot of these, because this is going to be broken up into 2 parts. So after part 1, there we go, the 2 parts, going to be prevention and eradication. Mostly we're going to spend a lot of time about not letting the noise get away from us. How did, I don't want to say, how did we get here? So we're going to have 2 parts. We've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. And after the part 1, Kelsey's going to field some questions. She's going to ask us, and Paul and I are going to do our best to answer it. So that's how that's going to work. And I'm going to mention at the end, we've got our last Expert Insight Forum coming up on Tuesday, September 13th. That's with Judy Aycock. Judy's going to talk a bit about, well, I'm going to ask her about a dog that went from a juvenile delinquent to national champion. She'll tell us a story about Hancho. This dog was 18 months old on a shooting preserve, out of control. They said he was killing deer. At 3.5, he won the Open National. How do you get from there to there? Well, we're going to talk about it. So, but that's not what we're here tonight for. What we're here tonight for is to welcome Mr. Paul Sletten.
Thank you, sir.
Pine Edge Retrievers, Paul Sletten. We were reminiscing a little bit about 2003. Paul finished his first national. We trained together. I was lucky enough to finish that national. Mike won with Patton, and we trained together. We had a great time. And that was really, I'm not going to say it was the beginning of a professional relationship, but it's really when we spent more time talking. And
You bet.
we've been good friends ever since. And hey, 7 years later, this guy, he was the one holding that trophy up. You saw it in the picture. Where was that at? Was it Texas? Mississippi. That was the Central Time Zone with Boo. So that was awesome. Matter of fact, that day I was sitting in a deer stand, opening day of deer season, watching my phone, jumping up and down when Paul got announced as the winner. I almost fell out of the tree stand. All right. Hey, let's get on. I'm going to try to clear my screen up here a little bit so I'm more engaged with everybody. And we're going to get started here. So part 1 is prevention. And Paul, first thing you said, which I thought was funny, I wrote in my notes, he says, what do you do when you got, and this is your words, you said, this little shit, 3 to 4 month old puppies starts, well, what are the early red flags? That first whimper.
Well, a little background. I've gotten a little more engaged with this recently in the last year.
Okay.
My beautiful now fiance and I, Tara Lanzak, have been training together and starting a lot of puppies and doing a lot more young dogs. And I've always done some young dogs, but kind of having my days more engrossed in watching them's really been exciting. And the thing that came to my attention with a couple of these little puppies we have is they kind of went from so-so, I like to retrieve a little bit, it's okay, to coming out of the truck screaming to go in the course of a week. And sometimes not very much go to getting overly stimulated and elevated and all jacked up, almost literally overnight. And I think a lot of the puppies when we start exposing them to the retrieving and they start building, and we're trying to build that retrieve design.
Sure,
we're bringing these puppies out. We're trying to get them jacked up. We're trying to get them to love it, charge out there and be exciting dogs. And then all of a sudden they get it. And a lot of them become exciting, hard charging dogs, but it's a little too quick sometimes.
Well, you're right, and somebody said this a long time ago, any quality taken to excess becomes a weakness.
Yeah.
They got it to play this game. They got to want to retrieve.
They do.
And it's so easy to just be so excited about this young puppy that will go through a brick wall to retrieve. And it's easy to ignore that.
It feels like more often than not, as the young dogs start to develop, we're doing a lot more trying to rein them in than we are pumping them up. We have the odd one we're trying to pump up and be careful to, but a lot of our conversation tonight is about ones more often than not that get to be a little more we can handle. And then all of a sudden, we often get to the stage at 3, 4, 5 months old where these puppies build, and maybe we're not really ready to be serious yet. We don't have a lot of basics into them. Maybe we're going to send them to our pro at 7 months old.
Right.
So we think, well, I'm just going to mark them. They'll deal with it. You know, they'll rein them in when they need to. And sometimes these puppies end up getting several days, then weeks, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 months of this overly stimulated state of mind when they come out to retrieve. And it's really hard to kind of knock them back in check, get their attention to properly go through a basics program and basics marking and start to learn through those steps, because you get them in at 7 months old or 8 months old and somebody's done a great job building that desire, but it's more than you need, and they're already getting away from you, and you find yourself already trying to knock them down.
Yeah, you hate to be pounded on that little puppy.
As soon as they come in, sometimes it's like you think I need to beat them with a stick, but you don't want to do that. But what do?
So are you thinking most of these cases, by the time you saw them, it's been going on for a few
I think
months?
it's been going on. A lot of times the owner kind of smiles, yeah, you know, he really likes to retrieve. This one's excited, you know, he's a handful, and you know, I can't really get him to pay attention very good. And so what I want to try to do is, as soon as I see early signs of these puppies having a little too much build,
You're not talking about just noise.
it's not just noise, but I'm seeing that build. And then maybe the 911 calls when you start to hear the whimper or and I'm not talking necessarily in the truck or on the stakeout, but I'm walking this puppy up to the line, and now it's starting to drag me because it knows it's going to do its marks, and it's starting to whimper. And now maybe I'm holding it back, and maybe it's small enough I'm still holding it underneath the armpits, and it's starting to maybe bark, maybe whimper, maybe be a wild Indian. And I got a 3 to 4 month old puppy, maybe 5 month old puppy that I don't have all those basics underneath that I can get through those adverse times. What do I do?
That's what I said. That's what we got. Like, what now,
So
Paul?
that's a little bit what I want to talk about doing tonight is what I've started trying to do with these puppies. Is the first thing I have to recognize is when I'm getting to that point where I kind of say, okay, 911,
Right.
this puppy's all of a sudden building and they're getting out of control on me. So what am I going to do? The first thing I got to do is recognize that they're in an overly stimulated environment that they can't handle right now. They're not able to handle it without getting too excited. So I have to find the balances of decreasing the stimulation and removing the dog from that environment.
Are you talking about not throwing marks for him?
That's going to be part of the process. Usually the first thing I'm going to do with as soon as I see this is in my mind, I'm going to say, okay, basics are going to start to get serious now. Obedience is going to start to get serious now. Now,
are you talking to 3, 4 months old?
If it's a 12-week-old puppy, that might be, guess what? Now we're going to do our obedience with the prong collar, and we're going to start doing our little obedience sessions like we do in the morning with treats and bumpers. Well, we're going to do it out in the field now. We're going to do it
in the atmosphere.
So we're going to take the dog and put him in an atmosphere where when he gets excited like that, when he gets jacked up and he's expecting that, we're going to teach him that, you know, the ice cream truck's not here. We're going to play janitor now and clean the bathrooms. You know, we're going to do something.
That song coming in the ice cream truck.
Exactly.
And then your parents are going to make you rake leaves or something?
Exactly. We got to de-stimulate. We got to give them a job to do.
Okay.
They got to have a job.
Okay.
Maybe that's only that 12-week-old puppy, and it won't.
So what are you doing, like place board work or just some healing drills or anything?
I love it. I'm anxious to learn more about the place board work, but I don't have experience with it. I haven't done it.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all the tools I can I'm going to tighten up my obedience.
Okay.
If the puppy's bad enough that I got to remove them, do obedience in a different atmosphere to tighten them up, bring them back out. What I'm not going to do is say, I'm not going to forget about it. As soon as he settles down a little bit, I'm going to throw him a mark. I'm cutting him off now.
Okay.
Now I might cut him off just for this setup, And I might cut him off just for this day, or I might cut him off just for this week, but he is cut off until I come out in this environment. He's not whining and he's responding to me in some fashion. So even if it's a little 12-week-old puppy, he's going to be on that long line. He's going to come away from the bird rack when
It's
I
like
call
when
him
your
with
parents
the treat.
don't give you TV time anymore. They
Exactly. Exactly.
Well,
And you know,
we laugh,
there's
but it
such
is-
small brains at
Yeah.
this point. What are you going to do? But what I can do is you think about all the things. You had a great subject matter with Pat Nolan
Mhm.
the other night. All the things you can do with a young dog. We can get them to do tasks for us at a young age.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be with collar pressure. It
Right.
doesn't have to be with a whipstick. It doesn't
Right.
have to be the 10-month-old dog now that I'm picking up by the collar and trying to helicopter around to get its attention, you know,
Right.
big physical, you know.
Right.
I can take this puppy and say, do something for me. Come to me,
Okay.
sit and look at me. Don't look at the field.
Okay. And that's when you talk about being engaged with you. That's what-
Engage.
okay.
Yes. I'm looking for that dog to take him out of the frame of mind of just being glazed over and excited to retrieve, and more in the, oh, what does Paul want me to do now? And as I can start building him back in, and his first thoughts start being, what does Paul want me to do? Now I can just spin around and say, you know what, just silently throw him that mark over there. And we build him back into that retreat.
So the key word
under
you said
control.
was silent.
Usually I'm going to start out with low stimulation. I want to keep things low key. So maybe the next couple marks this puppy gets aren't out in the midst of our normal training day. Maybe he's just staked out for the day. Maybe in the morning we do his obedience session. That's when he gets a mark or two after he does his obedience session in the morning. But he's going to start getting it in a lower.
You're not trying to
stimulated
advance
place.
his marking. You're just trying to get him.
I'm just trying to know. I don't care about what he's marking now. All I care is about he's coming out. He's paying attention. He's
Okay.
quiet. He's not whining. He's not lurching at the end of the leash. He'll kind of come over to me when I call him. Maybe he'll sit and relax a little bit. I can reintroduce him to the marking game in a different frame of mind. If he amps up again, we go back and we pull from the marks again for that setup or that day or that week. And we make sure we put him in the right frame of mind. And he's only going to be allowed to do his marks when he's in a proper working frame of mind. If he's not in a proper working frame of mind, no matter how little this puppy is, he doesn't get to retrieve today. I'm not worried about his desire at this point. He's got plenty.
Well, and that's not unlike some of the things Pat was talking about.
Mhm.
He talked about you have to leave the reward to get the reward. So you have to behave
Go
in
do
order to
something.
get the mark. You
Yeah.
have to do some obedience. You have to,
Yeah.
you got to not make noise. So
I want to try to build those dogs. This isn't necessarily for every dog, but the dogs that we realize they're getting away from us and they're a handful. They need to start that process pretty early in life. Like Pat talked about them getting that stuff ingrained.
Mhm.
They need to get that cooperation and that working with me and this team sport atmosphere ingrained real quickly. They can't have these first 9 months of their life be just this guy next to me just lets me go and I get to go retrieve and I get really good at finding birds. That's real cute and it makes a nice marking dog, but I got a lot of work to do to get that dog to do all age blinds and do difficult concepts and do things when it doesn't remember. So I got to have some team.
you know, it just makes me shake my head because there were dogs that made noise back in the day. I can think of them. I had a couple written on the board. River Oaks Corky, who highest pointed Labrador ever. You know, you heard stories of them having to shoot 100 pheasants before they'd let them retrieve one.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's true, but it's a good story. But we just didn't. And then it started just like that. It started sneaking up on us. And you hear one and you add one. And before you know it, it's an epidemic.
It seemed like when I first started my career, which was about 25 years ago, I guess now, we just said, well, just work them hard. They'll grow out of it. You know, they just need to grow up out of it and work hard. And now, as soon as I hear a whimper, I get really nervous that I potentially have a problem that I'm not going to be able to deal with later. And what I found most is usually if they're that high that they have some noise, they got some other issues going on too. I know we're going to
All
talk
right.
about that again, but
Yeah.
usually it's a dog. What I mean by that is it's a dog that's easy for me as a trainer to say, you know what, you're going to start doing more for me. You're going to work for me first, and then you're going to get your reward.
Okay.
So I'm going to start that as early as process as I'm going to try to start it early with them.
So it wasn't typical. You're right. You mentioned
wasn't
that. It was typical that a professional trainer would get a young dog in 7 months, maybe just a force fetch, 6 months and change,
Mhm.
but we're talking 2 months before that.
I find most of if you start to see noise issues come up, they can come up later too. Don't get me wrong, because a lot of these dogs, especially the males, I think slowly and they build, but what I'm worried about and what I want to help people with is, getting to that point, oftentimes pre 7 months old. A lot of times I see it coming up and building in young puppies. Don't get overwhelmed. I don't want people to get overwhelmed by it. I do want them to worry about it, but I do want them to worry about it and realize they can do something about it. They can be a little bit of a dog trainer, and don't feel like, well, I'm just going to wait till the puppy grows up a little bit and then I'll get after them for it and they'll settle down. I try to jump on it.
So what I hear you saying, and I've got on my board, is do you deal with this directly or indirectly? In other words, do you correct them on the word quiet? Or do you, but what I hear you saying is that you do other discipline behaviors to change their attitude.
Yeah. What I've gotten to where I don't even tell them quiet anymore. I use the quiet command around the kennel.
Well, that's right. You're right. Kennel, truck, stakeout.
Yeah. The places where I kind of want to say, stop barking. When I start getting this dog out and it's ready to work and I get it off, but from the time I get it off the truck or I engage it, I put the collar on it, I'm kind of preparing and it knows it's time to work. From that point forward, I don't want any more noise. I don't want whining. I don't want whining in the holding blind.
Okay.
I prefer not to have one. Now I've had dogs I thought, well, I'll put up with a little whining in the holding blind because I know they will be quiet when they get to the line. So maybe I don't pick on them. So this isn't like
the same.
Every dog's a little different, but boy, if I'm coming up to that line there, they're crying when them birds go off, or they're crying en route to the birds, or you release them and they're yelping when you release them. That's stuff that's got me nervous.
Well, and I had it in my notes, 0 tolerance on the kennel, truck, and stakeout. Is that, did I misunderstand that?
I don't have a 0 tolerance policy on noise. I think certain dogs at certain times, you can't kill them for every peep they make.
Okay.
And but I think there's times where they can understand to be calm. Why I don't directly deal with when I engage that dog in working, I don't use the quiet cue. If they're going to make noise, I don't directly say quiet. What I want to do is I'm just going to assume as a trainer that if you're excited enough right now, if this dog's excited enough and cranked up enough to make noise, it's too excited and too cranked up to probably make some complex decisions that I can put in front of it.
Okay.
And I'm going to demand that it do complex enough decisions at whatever age it is. I'm going to demand it does complex enough decisions that it naturally gets itself down and decides to not make noise because it's thinking more about how to scrub this toilet and not chasing the ice cream truck.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So in the beginning, you talked about Pat Nolan using, food as positive reward. That what are we doing here? Get this 3 to 4 month old dog. Are you doing that, or are you using a pinch collar or choke?
Yeah, okay. It's going to depend on the puppy and how far along. My hope is at this point, I've exposed this puppy to some leash obedience. It's had some things. It's retrieved, and I've spent a lot of days trying to build its retrieved probably. And now all of a sudden it's starting to go. So I'm going to oftentimes go to a little puppy prong collar and a short leash, and I'm going to get away from the field, start asking it to do things for me. I'm going to build its obedience sessions that I would normally do away from.
So when you say away from the field, are you talking about in the yard?
Yeah, like.
Or are you talking about when you get him off the truck, you see him excited while you'll walk behind the holding blind, behind the tree.
The opposite way. Yeah, but at that point, I got a 911 enough moment that I'm looking to right away. I'm looking, okay, I'm going to get his attention here for a few minutes here. I'm going to make him behave, and then I'm going to put him back in the truck, and then I'm going to take him over there out in about 10 minutes. I'm going to do some more obedience, but I'm going to start exposing him right away to you're going to get off the truck. You're going to do some work for me. You can go back on the truck. You're going to go on the chain. You're going to get more obedience in the yard,
so
away from the marking situation at different times of day to reinforce the good behaviors. Make sure I know what I can expect of you.
Okay.
Make sure I know when you get overly stimulated, I can say, hey, I know you know how to do this a little better. Let me see if I can get your attention here. Now, if this puppy gets to, maybe this is a 6 or 7-month-old puppy that I've started to steady a little bit already. Maybe it's gotten a little farther along and it knows some more obedience. Well, now I'm going to have to figure out, maybe I need a little more than obedience. Maybe I need to find more tasks for this dog to do. Maybe this dog needs to start learning how to, I'll mix in some different things like cold honoring.
What I heard you say, that one of the most critical things was the early detection, the first whimper.
As soon as I get signs of them making noise in conjunction with their work, I'm going to start finding tasks for them to do to give me their attention and to put them in a frame of mind that they're no longer willing to make noise because their frame of mind is different and they're thinking about a different task. And then they get to start marking.
And I don't have this vision of you jerking this 4-month-old puppy around. You're just being, so you leave the area that he was super excited in enough that you can do an obedience session that you've done in the yard. You're probably repeating something you've done, but just now he's a little extra super excited. Now
it's a harder task for him.
Now it's a harder task for him.
Yeah. And when he gets to be a few months older dog, I got to use whatever he knows at that point to make a challenging task for him again, to challenge him.
So, what Paul was doing, and he was saying he would take that puppy out, and when he first started to see that indication of whining, you went and did some obedience and different things, and then maybe you rewarded him with a silent throw, maybe.
Yeah.
And if he passed that, then
I want to build him back up.
Okay. And you gradually increase. You don't shoot, you don't holler, you just.
Correct.
And you said, I'm not worried about marking at this point. I'm just worried about the behavior that surrounds marking. I guess, is that safe to say?
You bet.
We talked about, and one of the things that stuck out is you don't correct them when quiet.
No, I don't use if they're making noise while they're working, I don't point my finger at it and be like, quiet, stop making noise. I take that quiet as a cue that you're too jacked up to complete a difficult task, I bet. And I'll bet if I can start making you complete some difficult tasks, you won't make noise because it won't be as stimulating for you.
So you're dealing with it indirectly.
I deal with it indirectly.
Because what you're saying is that it's not the noise is only a symptom of him being overstimulated.
I think when dogs are really stimulated to retrieve and they're making noise, that they're I think they often don't realize they're doing it. They don't realize they're making noise. They don't realize.
So you're correcting it for something they don't even know what they're doing.
I compare it to, if you can imagine somebody whipping you because you're breathing, and you're going to try to figure out over time that when you take a breath, you're getting sticked. I mean, that's literally, I think, what we're trying to get dogs to understand. They cannot, a lot of them at some point, they can't comprehend it. They don't understand what the discipline's for. They can't make the connection.
I know when we get into the older dogs, there's going to be different forms of noise, but everything you described was mostly the excitement leading up to getting to even to the line. So
or that initial retrieve, often it's that first one,
So you've got the dog that is super excited in the anticipation of going to the line. It makes noise. You've got the dog that squeals went on scent. You got the dog that is yipping as he's swimming across the pond towards that white bumper. Now, when you get in older dogs, you get more protest noise. What about the dog in force fetch that makes noise, not out of, like, you pinch his ear and he's out of the pain. You get the dog that goes woof and then grabs the bumper. Is that a 911? Is that a?
No, I don't think it is a 911, but I think it's something to be careful of. I think it's something to tweak maybe I try to tweak my routine a little bit and see if I can get them to do the task without making that noise, or find a different fashion that doesn't elevate them that way. But some dogs are like some people, like to talk a lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, some dogs like to talk a lot.
Okay. So do you want to discourage them talking?
Yeah. I mean, there's times when it's, they have personalities and all that, but I think they learn when they should talk and when they don't, for the most part.
Okay.
I say that, maybe that's a naive comment, but
Well,
with some discipline, when they moan, when they wake up in the morning and they make happy barks to go outside
and
by the
you pet them
door.
on the head and they go,
Yeah,
That's not the
cool.
same.
That's not the same. That's
Okay.
a dog being,
All right.
to me, that's a dog being a dog.
okay.
I'm talking about dogs that are stimulated. They're excited.
Directly related to retrieving.
Directly related to,
Okay.
I'm going to retrieve.
Okay.
And I'm so cranked up that some dogs dance at the line, some dogs break, some dogs creep, some dogs run as fast as they can, some dogs make noise. A lot of dogs do a lot of different things, but that energy is.
But the noises, but some of those other things you can manage.
Yeah,
Noise can be a deal breaker.
Noise is often a deal breaker.
So I'm just looking at a couple of our bullet points from our, well, you're right. They come with a high drive dog. One of the things, if you didn't hear early, it's a quality that you really like that bubbles over or boils over into behavior you don't like. Isn't that what we're saying?
Yeah. I feel like we so often associate doing marks and bringing dogs out to do marks and doing our marking setups is that we don't really have a lot to do as a handler necessarily. I mean, we got to heel them up to the line, then we got to show them the birds, and we got to, cut them loose and let them go and make sure they're looking at the right one, and, use the easy cue and put our hand down, do all this stuff that we work on as handlers. But when we come up and do a dog on a blind,
okay,
or we're going to do a dog and we're going to do our basics today, or we're going to do a blind retrieve.
Okay.
We have an attitude as a handler that we're kind of in control. Like, this dog doesn't know what's going to happen, and I'm going to take charge and I'm going to ask for it to complete some tasks for me.
Okay.
We have to do that more often when we're doing our marks. And I have to take an attitude to the field when I'm going to do a marks that this is a task that I got to take this dog and I'm going to ask him to do some tasks for me. Some of them might be in the process of doing the marks, but some of them might be before he runs and after he runs. And when he retrieves, when he gives me that last bird, I want to keep him engaged and keep him, maybe we walk over here and we heel and we got to sit and we honor good and we pull over and do a blind across a no pile. But I want to constantly keep these dogs engaged with us and try to make their marking a little more job oriented for those high dogs. So they have they have some tasks to do before they retrieve. They have some tasks that might be hard to ask in the midst of our marks that we challenge them on. And then oftentimes when they're done and they're huffing and puffing, you still got a task to do. I need you to run over there 20 yards and jump in that kennel hole that I'm telling you to get to. And then I need you to come back over here and honor, something to keep them, that your job's not over. So I want to keep them dogs engaged as much as possible for a long session and kind of stress their minds about, I got something to do. I got something to do. I got something to do.
So I'm trying to have this vision of what your day looks like. You and Tara are out there.
Yeah.
Is she still doing marks with other dogs while you're back behind the line doing obedience, or do you shut everything down?
No, I'll shut everything down and we'll work that puppy. So a lot of it
Takes a lot of patience. I mean,
well, it does.
You got
I can now. And let me stress, a lot of us pros out there that have right number dogs, you can't shut it down for the 4-month-old puppy that's making noise.
You got guys on the payroll sitting out in the field, like on their phones while you take a 15-minute.
So if we're up working and something starts to go wrong, time out. This literally, when you go out training with your training group, and I think about it especially with an amateur training group, because you have limited days. When you have all your crew together, it's exciting. It's exciting. But remember, when you take that puppy out or that young dog out of however old it is, your number one thing to accomplish that day is training that dog. It's not getting whatever marks somebody set up. It's training that dog.
So, I mean, you want to do the fun things.
We want to do the fun things. I want to see my dog get birds. I want to see him mark. Maybe he's really talented and it's really fun. But if I don't lay that groundwork early, you're going to talk about it, I'm sure, in your basics. If you don't lay that groundwork early, you're going to spend a lot of time worried about it later.
Well, it's the same old thing. I mean, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. you know, that whole thing.
This
I
is
mean,
a huge
that's
one for
exactly an example.
It is.
And I guess, you know, I'm thinking like, all right, the guy's sitting out, we're looking at his phone, he got 3 gunners in the field.
Mhm.
Maybe the fact that the dog's anticipating marks
Mhm.
and he has to do some other behavior
Mhm.
is a way more valuable use of the people in the field than actually shooting a pistol and throwing a bird.
Sometimes I think you have to look at this drive today as I'm going out to train with my buddies, and I'm so excited that I got this dog that's getting out of control, and I'm going to have a chance to put it in a really stimulating environment, and I'm going to get to do obedience with it, and I'm going to get to make it behave, and I'm going to make it so much headway in its training today, and go a little bit with that attitude. If you need to, then, you know, I'm going to try to ignore as much as I can. And I hope it ain't too bad. And I'm going to let it go because I really want to do the marks.
So a lot of this, you were talking about this before you've even force fetched them or even
Mhm.
collar conditioned them, but our next jump is going to go all the way into a more of a 2-year-old dog. Let's talk about a dog that's partway through basics.
Mhm.
You're doing a little bit of pile work or fetch.
And it
Would
comes-
that be something you would do? You might do a fetch with a pile of bumpers behind the line or anything?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will at any point decide that I'm going to incorporate my basics program
Okay.
out here into the field.
So it's whatever basics he's capable of doing.
That's often my go-to tool.
Okay.
I had an interesting case this winter of a dog that was making making noise swimming, only swimming, yodeling across the pond, yodeling when released for a watermark. Land was quiet, and it was a really hard one for me. I didn't know what to do, and had a little history of doing it before I got it. It
How
was
old
just
the
kind
dog?
of starting. This is a 6-month-old dog, and
Okay.
kind of cool out to start the winter, so you couldn't do a lot of water. But about the time you start doing a little bit of water, you realize, okay, this puppy's making noise every time it swims. I yanked her out of her watermarks for a little period of time. I needed about 3 or 4 weeks to get her a little more advanced through her pile work, and we started swim by. Started swim by. Hadn't started
Wait a
double.
minute.
Hadn't started double T. Just started sitting to the pile on land. Just
Okay.
starting to whistle sit. It's been forced slightly. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna teach you how to do swim by. And I'm gonna figure out. I was really afraid at this point that it was going to get away from me.
Okay.
So I thought I'm going to try to make this dog's.
Do something disciplined around the water.
Yeah, I wanted to have a job. So we changed up how we did basics. We went through basics in a different routine, not normal, but it took that dog and put her in a working frame of mind. And now all of a sudden I had some tools that I built to put her in a working frame of mind that she settled down and she didn't do it anymore.
You know, I mentioned in that little promo video about the bomb-proof basics,
Mhm.
about the importance of not just getting a slave to the steps. You understand the principles, and what you did there is you just cut and pasted somewhere else in the program
Yeah.
in an effort to deal with because you knew where you needed to get to eventually,
Yeah.
and you just decided to do it in a different form because
And you know, there's always, every dog's got special circumstances. I mean, this was a dog. If this dog was, you know, kind of nervous and wasn't comfortable in the water, maybe that wouldn't have been a good
Well,
step.
I
So there's
know.
all the what if. I don't want to, but my point is, we're going to find something to do that this is going to
Okay.
feel like a task and not the ice cream truck every time.
all right.
It has to feel like a task.
So I've got a little asterisk over here. You guys told me something you did, that you took your truck and you went to a field trial, and they weren't even running a field trial. You just wanted to get them at the field trial atmosphere.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm trying to do that more. A lot of times now when we're start running, we'll run a couple derbies here and there, but we'll kind of go volunteer once in a while. We're going to stay engaged with some trials. And I think it's really good for puppies and young dogs and basics dogs and dogs running the derby before they run derby to be good citizens at a field trial. They can't start learning that field trials are the place where we go and all bets are off and I get to run. They need to go where field trials are places where we go and we sleep in the crate and we relax and we pay attention and we air like good citizens and we can sit on a stakeout chain, relax, and we can see other people drive by. And I want them to be a good citizen at a field trial before I'm actually going to take them to line.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times, sometimes their first field trial experience for some of these dogs on a professional's truck is when they go to run.
Well, yeah, and
Maybe the owner took them when they were 10 weeks and they were cute, but really as their desire built and they actually became a retriever at 6, 7, 8, 9 months old and building, they go through this months and months and months. Now they go to a field trial and they get this big stimulation.
Yeah.
and it's their first time to run a field trial. And I think that's tough on
I know
some
we said,
dogs.
like, how does this dog develop trial behavior? He's never been to a field trial, but
He's
it's all
developing it the second he pulls in the driveway.
it's all the energy of the other dogs and probably the energy of you and everybody around them that they are really dialed in on.
Absolutely.
So you go to something like
Absolutely.
that.
So I want
That's
my
interesting.
little guys, hopefully, to get to a field trial and it not be an extra stimulating thing. It's another place we've been to. It's like going to Tractor Supply. It's just another, you know what I mean? It's another thing we do.
So you take the whole truck and walk around Tractor Supply and
We
you can go to Lowe's too.
we did it several times in Texas this year. We had one right in Giddings where we went through and we had a bunch of new dogs. And about once every 2 weeks, we stop. We spend about an hour. We take everybody into Tractor Supply for a walk. It was fun. It was fun.
Well,
And you know what? Some of them puppies, the little guy, some of the old dogs, you got them, they're afraid of a floor. How many times you seen a 6-year-old dog that's afraid to walk across your linoleum?
okay, cool.
Good
All right.
stuff.
I mean,
Exposure.
it just creative ways.
Creative ways to get dogs to
Right.
have something to do,
And
engage
that's-
their brain.
Well, and that's why I said, what you did was so impressive is that you, I mean, you win a national, you know where you need to get to. So
Yeah,
you worked your way backwards now
Yeah.
and so that's what I was saying. That's why I thought that was appropriate because
Mhm.
you're a perfect example of that.
Mhm. Well,
Because
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the fun part of it is
Right.
knowing what you want the end product to
I'm
be.
getting a message here. I don't know if we got any. All right, we got a lot of questions.
Good.
I know. And we got a lot derailed a little bit. So Kelsey, hi, thank you.
No problem. Hey, you guys, we've got a lot of questions, but some of these will be more appropriate later when we're talking about older dogs. So I'll ask my puppy questions first. This one's a big one. Paul, do you think this is genetic? Is this something that you would not double up on with a, mom and dad of a litter, or what do you think?
You know what? At the risk of annoying somebody, yes, I think it's absolutely genetic. Absolutely genetic. But they can have the problem whether or not a parent ever had it or not. But we all know there's dogs we knew that had issues, and their puppies sometimes have issues. And
Yeah.
genes are genes. And unfortunately, sometimes those bad traits come with a ton of good traits and traits we really appreciate. And a lot of times it's easy to point the finger at the mom or dad that had a problem. But then I think, you know what, if I get a puppy out of it, and maybe I can gear it a little differently, and maybe I could get that same dog to maybe I'm going to be a better trainer training the young dog out of that one, because now I saw what the parent was like. I can make sure I gear things a little
So you
differently.
change the environment.
Changing the environment for them. So it doesn't
Makes
keep me
perfect
from
sense.
wanting the dog. I think our training can go along with, I've never told somebody don't buy that dog because I'm nervous about the parent's noise issue.
I agree.
I've never told anybody that. I've looked.
But
at
you're
talent.
looking for those red flags sooner.
You bet. I'm ready for them. Yeah, I'm looking for them. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Awesome.
and I've had some litters where like the whole litter where I got 2 or 3 out of the same breeding. It's like, oh, I'm ready for these ones. I'm waiting for the day. And they, all of them were going to go through it sooner or later. They're going to start yodeling about something, and they all.
So first day of school, you met him at the front door.
Right
huh?
at the front door. I was like, all right, who's going to make noise first? Here we go. I know your mommy and daddy taught you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Hey, Paul, as part of your prevention plan for noise, do you start all puppies with no noise, no guns on marks, or is that really just puppy dependent?
It's completely puppy dependent. I'm gonna generally, as I start a puppy, we're trying to build enthusiasm. We're trying to up them and get them excited. And yeah, I may not use a gun right away because they may be afraid of gunfire, depending on how little they are. So yeah, completely dog dependent. Usually as these puppies start to build and you potentially start to see a noise thing, you've got some mark. Usually you've got some marks under your belt. You've got some sessions. You've went out with your buddies. Your puppy's starting to rip. You're stretching them out, 50 yards instead of 20 or whatever it is.
Right.
They're getting some retrieve in them, and then they go over the top. So usually you're not going to be at that first few mark stage where you got to worry about whether you have stimulation or not right off the bat, because you're going to have some work under your belt when you know this, most likely.
A lot of it uses the original steadiness drill protocol where you
Mhm.
de-escalate the excitement level.
Yeah.
So that, you not only correct the bad behavior, you try to create good behavior so you can reward it, you know.
I think that drill's good stuff.
But this is,
Yeah.
that really uses the same
Same
theory of
Yep.
denying the reward,
Mhm.
not just correcting the behavior.
Correct. Yep.
Just one more question for this section. Let's see here. You mentioned making the tasks more difficult for the dog if you start to see this noise. So when you've got that 12-week-old puppy, what are some of the behaviors that you're asking for other than like sit? What else do your puppies know at 12 weeks?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a long rope on them, maybe 20, 30, 40-foot rope, 50-foot rope. And I'm gonna start, what I'll start doing is I'll say, okay, time out from the marks for a second. We're not gonna do any marks. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take this puppy, it's getting a little out of control, and I'll kind of drag him back to the truck, and I'll put my long rope on him, maybe. And then maybe I'll turn them loose. And they're gonna go try to run out in the field or run over here, and hey, puppy, come here. Maybe he's only 12 weeks old here, and I'll give him a little snap if I have to, but I'm gonna try to get him to engage and come to me. That's gonna be my big thing, is here. And I remember hearing Jim Van Engen talk about here, here with these little puppies here. That will be my first go-to with a real young puppy that I don't have much basics on. I don't have many tools that I can use to make this dog behave. I don't care how little, 12 weeks old, if I got a treat and I got a rope, you're gonna come here when I call you. And you're good. If I got to get you to do it 100 times, but I'm going to bring you out in this environment where you're excited to do marks and train, and you're going to turn around and come at me instead when the marks are over that way. But you're going to start coming the first time I call you and be a good puppy, or we don't get to do the other stuff. It just doesn't happen.
What Pat's comment, you got to leave the reward to get the reward.
Exactly. So
Yeah, thanks.
And oftentimes the beauty is, you know, we're going to get into this more with the older dogs, that, you know, the repetition, the time, and the patience. I'm hoping with these little puppies, a couple sessions, and all of a sudden they start coming here a little bit and they pay attention to something else. And now Paul's fun, and they kind of forgot about retrieving for a second, and now I introduce it slow. A lot of times I get this stuff gets nipped in the bud, and it's just not a big deal. It just doesn't turn into big battles. I'm not looking for big battles with 12-week-old puppies. I'm hoping to snap their attention a little bit and say, hey, oh yeah, hey Paul, I'm coming to you. This is fun. I get a treat. And that's all I needed for them to disengage and de-escalate a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't take much, but it just takes a trainer saying, I don't like the way you're acting right now. Let's get you to act a little different.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got to thank you, because neat little young dog, 6-month-old dog. Just about a month ago, he came in, and you're like, wow. I mean, he's impressive. Well, exactly what you described. And we said, no. And we went and I'll tell you right now, he's a little gentleman. He's doing Pine Edge Magic, healing backwards.
Love it.
You're going to tell us about Pine Edge Magic. And I think we've really turned right. I think we did exactly what you said. We nipped this guy in the bud, and he went from overstimulated to, no, I'm not saying he's going to bubble over, but you really kind of said, you know what? It was like perfect, because I talked to you, and it was 2 days later, I saw him, I said, yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about, and it would be easy to let it go.
Do you feel like you got a grip on them quick enough now that you got a tool that the second they start to revert a little bit, you kind of see it now, you know it, and you can snap them back into your world a little bit? And do you see that? And I hope is that maybe it's going to be that way for life now. Maybe they're good to go. Maybe
I think we definitely shifted the tides.
Yeah.
And
the longer it shifts your way, the closer you are to where you want to be.
And when good discipline behavior becomes habits.
Yep.
Now it doesn't take discipline anymore, just a habit.
Yep.
And now you're not beaten up, and now you're not really using that much discipline.
No, and I'll bet the dog's not deflated because of it. It's still running hard. It's still animated. You didn't take away its.
So I know we're going to use this Pine Edge Magic thing. It's a third bullet point on our deal, but the story on this is Paul and I are doing a seminar together, and we got a dog that's coming out pretty full of himself. And I looked at you, and you looked at me, and you said, Pat, why don't you just go ahead and sit down? He said, I'm going to show you a little Pine Edge Magic. And I said, and I went like, oh, here we go. But it was great. So what is it?
Okay, so one thing I started, it's not rocket science, but this is generally now, if we're talking about older dogs, we're talking about a little more
Well,
refined.
that's where we're
We're
headed.
talking about dogs. Generally, I'm working off leash for
Yeah.
the most part. I mean, they're behaved animals. I'm expecting if I give them a correction, they understand it well, respond the right way, come
Right.
to heel. So what I started noticing happening, watching people, watching myself, watching my clients, is that my dogs were being pretty good around the holding blind, going to the line. But we were starting to get in a lot of dog heel, 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 here, heel, heel, heel. And if you go to a field trial, you'll catch yourself with your own dog, or you can certainly watch the next three and you'll see somebody heel, 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 heel.
7, 10 times.
7, 10 times, 30 times. And I realized that sometimes in training we're doing it.
Mhm.
And I think I'm in training and I got a transmitter, I got a collar, I got a whistle, I got all my tools here. I shouldn't have to do this anymore. So what I've started doing is once I get that dog engaged and sitting in the blind and I walk out of the blind and I'm going to start approaching the line, I ask the dog to heel
Okay.
and then I don't speak to it again. Its job is to follow me.
Stay in here.
Stay in the heel position, just like an obedience dog in a ring somewhere. We're going to do figure eights. We're going to walk away from the line. We're going to walk to the mat and stop and then continue walking.
So what do you do when he doesn't,
Okay,
when he
so-
keeps running to the mat and you're walking this way?
Exactly. In fact, as soon as I notice that dog take his attention off me, I'm going to go a different way to make sure that he's wrong and is being bad. And I'm going to give him a collar correction, cold correction with no.
Now, what you told me, you dropped your intensity down a little bit. You went to more continuous low level.
I'll drop it down low. I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to get them hard enough that they notice it and respond. I want a response.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying I don't have a high rolling dog that I've nicked a couple times and I don't burn a little harder. I'm not
Right.
saying don't amp up with the pressure, but I'm going to just keep a
Right.
low pressure in that dog. If they do something volatile and don't immediately come into the heel position with that, correct? I want to stop. I want to stabilize them, sit, relax here, come back here to the heel position and start walking again. But ultimately, I want to get this dog where it follows me. And I don't want to say heel, 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 heel. I want that dog to be engaged in following me. And generally, most old dogs, when they get engaged in that before they run and they kind of get in that mode of working with you, it just gets them off to the right start, that they're starting their test by working with you, not
So
starting
you
the
think,
test by working
well,
on
we're
their own.
talking about noise. You think this is something that would help?
I think it's a huge thing that would help. And what I'm going to look for is to put the dog in a position to fail the task at hand, so I can ask it to be more attentive.
So are you sitting in the blind saying, I know I'm going to do this? Or is it based on the behavior when you step up?
It's based on what I see. I'm going to let it tell me what to do. I'm not going to headhunt the dog. I'm going to let it tell me
Okay.
what to do. If it's being a good citizen and it's going through the motions and it's giving me his attention, I don't need to do obedience and figure eights and pine edge magic for another 12 minutes. I need to do it long enough that the dog's engaged and paying attention and it's ready to go to work. Now, with a noisy dog that maybe doesn't want to heel and doesn't want to watch their birds and is bouncing around at the line,
Right.
it's not very hard to trick them into not healing very good.
Okay.
It's just not.
So you don't just wait for the noise. You see the
I'm looking for the lack of attention to me
Right.
asking to do a task.
because like I said before, so often we're dealing with the cough and not the cold. In other words, we're only trying to treat the symptoms, but not really the problem. You're saying the problem is the lack of awareness, engagement with their leader,
Mhm.
the handler.
Yeah, I think most of the time when we get into these older dogs now that have maybe had a problem to some extent, and Lord knows I've had plenty of them. I think I've had a lot of them that I've helped end up being kind of manageable enough that the noise wasn't too bad, that you could get by if
Right.
it was the right judge. You never really know. A lot of times we're talking about, sometimes we can't fully eradicate it. Sometimes we're trying to manage it as best we can and keep them from being too wild down to manageable with a little noise. Maybe that's the best we can get sometimes. But I'm going to let the dog dictate. If I can find ways for that dog to get engaged, do a task, have some difficulty with its work. An older dog, I'm going to look for it to have difficulty on its marks or its blinds. I'm going to challenge it. I don't want this dog coming out and everything's happy time. Every time it retrieves, it's got maybe a potentially a tough task to do and a rule to follow and something to pay attention to, or it's not going to go good for it.
Let me say one more thing about this silent healing deal, which
Yeah.
the thing that I saw that I thought was helpful was that super jacked up dog, that it's easy to want to scream at him
Mhm.
and then, heal and then make a big correction.
Mhm.
And which almost oftentimes just seem to actually escalate the state of mind.
Yeah.
The low key, low pressure, you being just really wearing them down through
Mhm.
a certain degree of attrition to make until they actually said, all right,
Mhm.
we're just healing. I'll
give.
do it.
Yeah.
That seems to have, I've seen that, witnessed that be way more effective with high powered dogs than higher pressure.
I feel like if you ask them quieter and ask them softer, they got to listen better. They have to. They just have to. If I get, sometimes I'm at fault. I raise my voice and say, sit and hear more than I should,
Right.
and louder than I should. But every once in a while, when I catch myself, I just take this dog that doesn't want to hear me, and I say, heal. And I'll correct it with the biggest correction that it's going to get that day on heal.
Yeah.
You have to listen to me, and you have to try to listen to me.
Walk softly and carry
A big stick. Yeah.
or a hot collar.
A hot collar. There you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, and we had excessive pressure, thumbs down on the board.
Yeah. It generally, they get more amped up. I want to try to lower I know we've all had the sticking sessions and the sessions where we've used physical pressure to try to de-escalate them. There's times it can help, but ultimately you're playing a mind game here. You're playing a mind game against this dog. You're not going to correct it into simmering down. You're going to make it think its way into simmering down, I think.
I know a lot of these folks on here tonight where they were hoping we were going to have the silver bullet for that 3.5-year-old dog.
I know.
To just turn them around and all of a sudden turn. I mean, there's things you can try,
Mhm.
and you really wanted to. That's why prevention was number one.
Prevention's the big thing. Unfortunately, that might be with your next dog. I get that. You might have a 10-month-old puppy, and at this point, prevention might even be with your next puppy. But I hope that's a valuable thing to try to at least recognize and call somebody for help. At least recognize and ask your friends, okay, I realize here what I got. Let's talk about what I'm going to do, and stay on the early dogs, stay engaged on at least recognizing it. Most of us have gotten to the point where now we have an older dog. We've been dealing with the noise for quite a while to some extent, and we're trying to manage it as best we can.
Do you remember there was a really good dog that Larry Wharton owned? Was his name Zipper?
Okay. Yep. I didn't see him run.
But he was a really high powered dog.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know if it was a noise issue, but one thing, and I don't know if Ed Forey was really a part of this, and I think he was High Point Open Dog one year, but he had a great career. The one thing they did that I thought was kind of interesting is they were doing triples with everybody else, but when Zipper came up, the birds were already on the ground, the guns were sitting there, and every retrieve was a blind. Just another creative way to turn the anticipation of being wild into something structured.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was kind of an interesting thought.
I've seen that done. I've done it. I had an interesting dog over the past couple of years that it was really a challenge with his energy, and we did some of that. I did it a little differently though. We put our marks out. I try to put every mark had kind of a fundamental aspect to it, where if you followed a rule, you got to the bird. You had to swim down the channel, or you had to take this long entry into a pothole, whatever it was.
Right.
So I would set up marks that were challenging.
Okay.
I wouldn't throw them. I would just come out and I would say his name, cut him loose, and say, you better go out and you better stay to the right side of that gun, and you better lean into that pond.
So you never did throw the bird.
Didn't throw
and
the
you
bird.
sent him as if it was a mark.
Yeah, and I kind of treated it like
Oh.
this doesn't always have to be fun for you. This doesn't always have to be
That's
stimulating for
another-
you. This doesn't always have to be your happy time.
I've sent dogs and part way out throw it, but you're talking about
Say,
just
go out there and you're going to get in that channel where that gunner's down at the end. And if you run at him, you miss the channel. And if you go to the right of him, you swim down the channel. Like you would a hard cheating single for a.
And would you just manage like a cheating single? You just handle him
I would handle him. And depending on how he acted, maybe I'd be tougher on him. Maybe I'd call him back all the way and resend him. Maybe I'd handle him through
Well,
it. Maybe I'd have the gun eventually throw one. I don't know how it would go, but I'm looking to Make
You know,
that dog.
every time I'm around you, you teach me something new, and
Oh,
it's like, all right, I
well,
gotta try something.
I might be able to mess them up pretty good too, but we'll try. No, but the point is, I took that dog from something that he wanted really bad, in his mind was gonna happen, that I was gonna come out and these guns were gonna throw birds for me and I'm gonna get to go retrieve them. And that didn't happen. Something else happened and I had to think really hard and I wasn't sure what to do and I had to manage my way through some trouble. And that's how my day went. And when that happens enough, they start to work a little bit in that frame of mind at some point, and they don't come out like, oh, this is where all the guns throw birds for me. It's great. They come out where this is where the guns are, and he's going to ask me to do something hard, and I got to pay attention. And he might ask me to go over. I had this dog. You remember ever hearing about the balance ball peanut
Oh,
thing?
yeah,
I
yeah.
spent some time with my dogs, condition him on the
Yeah,
balance.
yeah.
I had a dog. I would literally make him go over and hold on the balance ball. And he would shake, and it was so hard to stay on that balance ball when you're shaking, all your muscles going. And so you better sit there. You're gonna.
And the balance ball is used for rehabilitation. And
Yeah,
core
yeah,
strength.
but it was hard for him. He had to come out, and instead of working, he had to stand on the balance ball and watch the first dog run. It's just something for him
That's
to do
interesting.
to take his mind. You can be as creative as you want to. Find something for the dog to do
Yeah,
besides what
that's
they
a great
think they're
message,
going to do.
Paul. That's a great message. I mean, it really is. And, you know, there were a number of things there that got my head turning, and, you know, and I could think of some of the real wild dogs. I don't know if you were you ever around that Tyrone dog that Terry Veach, and he was one of those dogs that you kept having to change the routine.
Constantly.
Once he patterned you, you were in trouble.
Yes.
So that's what you're saying is you were
Yes.
trying different things. Like, so this dog was like, he had to look at you like, are we going to get a mark today? Are we going to do a blind, or is he going to send me? So but if you only did that, it probably wouldn't have been as effective. It was the changing of things that made
Keeping
it more
him
valuable.
off guard. You know, you say that, I remember a comment you made to me. I had a hard going dog and it didn't have a noise issue, but it had the same issues. It was
Right.
a lot of dog that I
Right.
couldn't manage. So I needed to do the same things with this dog as if it was noisy to get it to be under control for me. And I remember you telling me, you better be ready every time you take it out of that truck. If you're not all in, if you're not ready to take that dog out and train it and work it and be all in on what you got to do today, you're better off not training it. Don't come out and do it half
And I'll tell you,
style, or you're going to get behind. And so if I was going to run that dog on one setup, I had to have my gloves on, and I don't know what we're going to get into today, but we're ready to go. I can't, you know what? I'm going to let him slide a little bit. I just want to get this cheating single done. I'm not going to worry about it if he makes a little noise. I can't take that attitude ever.
you know, most of the discipline's on us then,
It is.
not on the dog.
It is. And that is hard. It's hard.
And
sometimes.
I say to people, I said, the minute you touch that handle, either on the box, the truck, that dog's sizing you up.
Yeah, yeah.
He's paying attention to everything about you. If you're not paying attention, then he's, you know, they are unbelievably
In
perceptive.
tune. Yep. Mhm.
You know, there's a few other things I think back over history that fall in place. There were things that, you know, this is where selection became a valuable thing.
Mhm.
Not just in selection, primary selection, where they wouldn't let him have the flyer and make him take the short bird first, or they do things that required structure and control in that atmosphere.
Mhm.
Secondary selection, people thought, oh, is that a good way to get a short bird? Yeah, probably is, but it's way more valuable in engaging and managing things like this. That would be another example
Exactly.
that I've used or seen used over time.
Mhm.
Was
Yeah.
different. When I think all these are variations of that.
Mhm. The
Situation.
discipline you're trying to build into your, you could start talking. Another way this conversation can end up going is how you structure your training tests and the difficulty of your
Right.
tests for whatever age dog, to bring out that workmanlike attitude and not just you get to go find birds, don't worry
Well,
about it,
and
you don't have to try hard.
It's hard. I find myself wanting to go out and play field trial every day and just,
Yeah.
let's just scrimmage. Let's just pretend like and throw a triple, do this.
Uh-huh.
But that's the trap you find yourself getting
Yeah.
into with these dogs.
And I feel like I've been that way, probably been that way a lot of days over the years. And I find myself now more leaning towards not being that way. More believing, I'm going to train you to do something today, or we're going to do this. We're going to do these 3 marks, but I'm going to make sure you can do this too. And I'm going to make sure you pay attention to me good. And I'm going to make sure you're still engaged enough that you can do a blind when you're done with your marks, and trying to play those mind games of keeping the dogs engaged and working with you, and not just that routine of getting them out, air them, let them watch the triple, cut them loose, back to the truck, you know, and kind of feeling like you're rushed through your work, rushed through your mark and tester. You got to get your marks in quick to go out and throw so your buddy can run his dog.
You know, we're going to get a lot of people in trouble tonight because these guys are going to go out in their training group and they're going to say, you guys just sit down for a while I do this.
Yeah.
It's not going to be popular. You know, you're
No,
going
it's
to,
not.
there's some of these things you're going to have to, and maybe you're going to have to talk to your group. Maybe
You
you're
do.
going to have to like have a meeting and say,
You do.
all right, you know, this is what, you know, and some of these guys aren't going to be happy.
No, I get on what I get it. Even when Tara and I are out there training, I get, have a seat. I'm going to be a few minutes, you know, and she knows like, we're going to have a session here and it's not going to involve the throwers at that point. So what I would do if I was going to tackle some of these noisy dog issues with my training group, with my pro group that I train
Right.
with, or if I'm a pro with my helpers, I'm going to warn them what's going on. I'm going to say, hey, I got a special deal going on with a dog here. In fact, I need your guys' help with, if you can help me. If you get your training group engaged on helping you with your problem and letting them know that you're open to ideas, now they're going to be excited to help you.
Okay.
Excited to engage. We got a nice dog here. I think it's got a lot of go, and I need you guys' help for the next couple of sessions, and tell them, you know, I might not be able to do my marks. I'm just, give me my 15 minutes if you can. I'm going to do this. And then I want to maybe do a single, and I'm going to put them up and I won't bother you anymore, but let them know what's going to happen so they don't get that deflated. Oh, here we go again. And it's going to take a half an hour.
I know, you know, probably this guy's going to have to be the guy out in the field.
Mhm.
What about coming up while somebody else is doing marks and just be doing this? So you're not
All the
slowing
time,
things down.
all the time. If you got a chance to take one of these dogs and work it around somebody's environment or a pro environment, or maybe you went to the field trial this morning and now you went to get lunch in town, and you can go put your dog in situations where you can get them out and work them around. They need to work and be good dogs in the environment on a regular basis before you could count on them to be good dogs and work well in the
So
environment.
did you initially and deal with this head on and deal with directly with the word quiet and then realize it didn't work?
Yeah. Early on, when I started having more times, I felt like I was in charge of working on the problem. Yeah, it turned into like, once you're quiet, you're good. You know, I got to get you to be quiet. So as soon as I can stop your noise, then everything's good. You're not making noise anymore. And I've just changed more, like the noise isn't good enough for me anymore. I'm looking for attitude changes. I'm looking for that though with the noisy dog, but I'm also looking for with high dogs that tend to be out of control
Creep
and not
and
pay
jump
attention.
and not
Creep,
move with you.
have all the problems that dogs have from being too
Right,
much
right,
energy.
right.
Noise is one of them. It's the hard one. But all these high dogs is how I'm striving to rein them in this way. Yeah.
Well,
And I used to point right at quiet. Now I realize that I think the dogs, most of them don't notice they're doing it at this point in their career. They don't understand.
well, that is the scary thing, is when you're correcting them for something, you don't know if they understand what they're being corrected for. And then and what happens, some of these dogs have so much go, they'll just endure it.
Mhm.
And it's a sad day when they quit trying to learn from pressure. They
Mhm.
just say, well,
I'll put
I
up
get in
with it.
trouble, but I want a bird bad enough, I'll deal with it. And
Yeah.
they don't even try to change their behavior.
Mhm.
And that to me, that's the worst scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kelsey, do we have some questions? We probably do. You're smiling.
We have a lot of questions. So I'll try and keep them relevant to what we've just talked about. So one question for you guys. We've gotten several questions about dogs, especially young dogs that are only making noise in the water. They're en route to a mark. They're quiet on the line. What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so I'm going to assume for the sake of this that if that question's been asked by a few people too, it's probably dealing with different ages of dogs. I mean, we might deal with this with a 4-month-old dog, a 9-month-old dog, a 12-month-old dog. So I'm going to try to answer that from a
How many
standpoint.
older dogs have you seen that were quiet everywhere else that made noise swimming on a mark?
Not many. Usually it
mostly a
starts
puppy thing,
early.
isn't it?
Usually a puppy thing. So I'm going to be worried about it and I'm going to address it, but I'm going to assume that this is probably a younger dog and we're getting started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remove it from the situation where it wants to make noise. I can't do much when it's swimming. It's en route. It's kind of like I gotta do my work. I got to get that dog in the right frame of mind before it does the mark, right? Because once it starts doing the mark, I can't really do much with the puppy that's going. So I'm going to look to, I'm going to look for the puppy to have a lot of exercise. I'm going to look for it to come out and do a lot of, I'm going to look for it to do some landmarks first. I'm basically going to look to tire it out a little bit before I get to its watermarks. And then when I get to its watermarks, I might go down to the edge of the pond and walk into my knees and let it swim around and play around a little bit and settle down. And then I'm going to try to have the puppy at the most de-escalated point in its day before I'm going to do my first non-stimulating short swim watermark. And I'm going to try to build this dog through, I'm going to try to use its energy level against it and tire it out a little bit.
You know, I've seen these puppies where you throw that white bumper and he's seeing it.
Yeah.
And we do it because we don't want him to cheat and we want him to target it. But if you start throwing
Too much.
something they can't see,
Sometimes that
sometimes that helps the noise.
Yes, sometimes that helps the noise. So evaluate what you're doing on your bumper, how long your swim is.
Maybe throw a black bumper instead of a white one.
If I'm going to shoot a flyer today, it's going to be the 9th retrieve of the day, not the first one in that pond. I don't want to bring my puppy out first thing in the morning and say, let's do some watermarks and hope he doesn't make noise today. He's going to. Okay, I'm going to take him out. I'm going to take him for a long walk. And then I'm going to do him on some landmarks. And then I'm going to do some obedience. And then I'm going to take him for a walk with another dog by the pond and let him retrieve a few bumpers and have a good time. And then I'm going to stake him out for a while. And then when it's the end of the day and he's ready to sleep, I'm going to get him out and do a non-stimulating watermark. And I'm going to try to build him up because I don't have the, I got to use it against him.
And I'll tell you, it has been my experience that the dog that only makes
It'll
noise
go away.
swimming, that's the one that goes away.
Usually that'll go away.
You agree?
Yeah, amen.
I mean, it doesn't mean I want to ignore it.
I'm
but
going to deal with it in fashions that I can discourage it, but I'm going to feel like a little bit of discouraging is probably going to be fine. If someone had a dog different than you described there that was older, I'd be interested to get another question about it.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. What about dogs that only make noise when they're scent for the mark? So again, you kind of touched on that, but can you dig into how you would handle that situation?
Yeah, that's another hard one. Squealing the tires.
Yeah.
I got a dog right now that likes to do it on blinds only, not the marks, and that's just one of them things for whatever reason.
I think it's one of the hardest because you call them back and then you get the dog that makes the noise and then now you got a noise and a no-go problem.
Again, we're dealing with an older dog. We talk about step 2 here, trying to eradicate noise. This is going to be a tough one to eradicate, but I'm going to try to, I hope I've done enough that at some point I'm going to build a no tolerance standard on this end. If I got to have no retrieving for a week or a month or whatever, but I'm going to establish that you're not going to scream when I send you and you're never going to go. I'm never going to let you go.
On the, when it goes,
yeah, on the scent. I got to stop it.
you see some of those dogs starting to quiver and they're about to squeal.
And pet them, just relax them a little bit.
You do that some?
Yeah, and I'm going to mix up my cadence. I'm going to try to relax them. I'll try to send them when their breaths exhale instead of inhaled sometimes, and try to give tools to help them because still they don't know they're doing it. At some point, maybe I got to be careful what I'm saying here, but I'm not going to put up with it at all. If I'm going to choose to dive into this problem and deal with this dog, it's going to have to be a zero tolerance policy to see where I can get to. I might give up at some point, or I might decide my standard is going to be different. But at some point, I got to lay some foundation of drawing a line to figure out whether or not I can get that dog close to my side or not. But what I can't do is be inconsistent about what I'm going to do. I got to draw a line somewhere and stick with it for a period of a few days and see where I get to. That's what makes it such a tough problem. But if you have a muddled line that the dog can't understand, the standard, I don't know how you ever get anywhere.
Well, you got to repeat what you just said, because that goes not just for this, but it goes for everything.
Yeah.
If you have an unclear or unclear standards, I mean,
If you have an unclear or muddled standard of what's to be expected in that dog, how can you ever expect him to give you the response that you'd like to have? It has to be you got to have some defined lines on what's to be expected and what's not. And if we're consistent, they'll be consistent and they'll thrive on that. They'll be a more comfortable dog than they will be having inconsistent standards.
there's no doubt about that.
How would you handle barking in the kennel?
Oh, brother. I hate barking in the kennel. And you know what? I've used bark collars before, depending on the dogs.
Right.
Some dogs it works great. Some dogs it doesn't work at all, and I can't use a bark collar. Some dogs I got to go down and I get my stick out and I grab them around the collar and I give them a couple of whips and tell them to be quiet and try to settle them down. Some dogs I take them out of the kennel and put them in a crate for the night, or bring them up and put them in a crate by the house. If they're really bad, I got to keep those dogs. It's one thing when I let them out in the morning or it's feeding time, I get that there's going to be some barking, but they're capable of not barking, and they're capable of I'm just trying to keep the demeanors quiet.
You think that
possible.
noise is related to this noise?
No, some of the worst barkers I have would never, ever make a noise working. And some of the dogs that I've had the biggest noise problems with are complete angels in the kennel.
Wow.
It's just a different stimulation. It's a different stimulation, I think. So, you know what? I would say do what you think you want to do to try to manage keeping your dog quiet in the kennel. But if it's not a problem while it's working, don't make it, I don't think you got cross-contaminated problems there. I don't see them as the same problem.
We be talking about trial and test specific issues here later on, or should I ask those questions now?
Go ahead.
Well, I think this is later on.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. So we have so many versions of my dog only makes noise at a test. My dog only makes noise at a trial. And so, I know that those situations are probably pretty unique depending on the dog, but what would you do there?
Okay. We could do a whole webinar on trial behaviors, managing trials, managing running dogs. You got to decide to what extent, how bad it is. You got to decide, is it keeping you from passing the hunt test or getting the judges throwing you out? If it's that bad, you got to decide if you want another dog or not. If it's a problem you can't control. If it's a problem you think you can deal with, you're going to have to get them away from field trials for a while and hunt tests. You're going to have to not run. You're going to have to put them in training situations and reintroduce them to those stimulating environments and go into field trials and not running, and reintroduce them to those stimulating environments and see if you can make a dent in it. But that's your only chance. But I could tell you what won't work. It's running your next hunt test or field trial. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be bleak, but it's not going to go good for you.
It never made sense to me that just picking them up was going to all of a sudden say, well, I guess
It's not about picking
I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick them up, but I don't necessarily think that's going to cure it.
It won't cure the problem. You need to cure the problem. You're laying the foundation before you get to that event. If we've got a dog that has learned when we get to that event that that's the way they're going to act, prevention is the biggest thing. But if you're there now, yeah, you got a serious problem and you got to get away from some field trial. If you want to work on the problem and you want to make it better, you got to separate yourself from those environments where you're out of control. You can't put yourself in the situations where you're no longer in control of the outcome that the dog does. Not saying be a control freak, but if you're not in control enough.
So many of those dogs that I've had owners come and work with me that talk about that. He only makes noise at a trial. But I'll see 3 or 4 things most of the time in training, then going like, well, that's not very good either.
Yeah.
And they think if it's not noise, it doesn't. And our whole talk was about noise was just, it's a part of a bigger package.
Yes. And oftentimes when you go to that field trial, noise is part of more of the creeping or the not watching birds or the getting out of control in the blind or all the loose, high energy things dogs do to make mistakes. So another way you could look at it is, okay, my dog's making noise at a field trial, but I'm going to try to make him better at other things too. I have plenty of things I can work on besides just the noise.
Right.
And you need to have an honest conversation with yourself about, I'm at the field trial. Where do I wish my dog would listen a little better? Maybe it's not just at the line. Maybe it's when you're airing. Maybe it's when it's barking when you're pulling in the driveway. Maybe it's growling at everybody that walks by your truck.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, but you can find things that your dog should be a little more well-behaved, I bet, and work on them too. Have an open mind about it, because it's going to make you a better trainer and it's going to make your dog better.
I think that's the best answer you can give.
Question about judging. I mean, where do they draw the line? What kind of noise is okay in a trial? What's not?
All right, so here, I want to ask you a question. So this all initiated or was part of being a great hunting dog.
Mm-hmm.
When does noise interfere with your hunt? When the birds are in the air, when you haven't shot yet. Now, I think a dog that goes on a send on a retrieve, from a judging standpoint, is not as problematic to me. The two that are the worst are the dog that's making noise when the birds are being thrown and making noise when he's honoring another dog that the birds are being thrown. To me, that's the like
Bad. Yeah.
a dog that is going "Har, har," on the way to a retrieve. Now,
we can deal with it.
I want to fix it, but
Mhm.
from a judging standpoint, I think the practical thing is, at what point would it destroy my experience in a hunt?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you haven't shot yet and the birds are working over your head, that's when the noise of the dog is going to flare the birds. To me, I don't know if that's even, because I know we're like, maybe field trials are so far removed from hunting, but really most of the rules of field trials were intended to make better hunting dogs.
I think that's a great way that could probably make you a better trainer too, is if you look at it as a trainer from that point of view, it's going to help you too. Because when I say things about, when they bark on the send, don't let them do it. Well, it's draw a line and figure out where you're at. And we're going to try to make the dogs perfect no matter what. We're going to try to make them perfect.
Right.
On as many things as we can reasonably. But we can't make perfect judges, and nobody's ever told a judge that I know of where the line's supposed to be. So you're going to have to learn. There isn't a good answer. Every judge is going to have a different line to some extent, aren't they?
In different eras, there were different behavioral issues.
I can't remember the last time I've had a
Creeping.
judge warn me for a dog making noise.
Creeping, munching on a bird.
Mhm.
And some of the old time judges would say, I want to see what they do in the field, and they'll ignore some of that. Now,
Okay.
I don't know if that's right, but they will. And then some people are just zero tolerance for any of it. So
Have you had a dog be penalized for noise running?
I don't think I ever had a dog thrown. I've had a few that made noise,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't. But today, I think people,
I think
because
they're
it's a
remar-
bigger
I
subject,
think they're remarkably lenient, because usually one of those two people in that chair
Are
is
deaf.
have one of those
Like
dogs.
us.
They're deaf, or they've had one of those dogs.
they're
And they know they're a handful and they're a lot of go, and they kind of want to admire the good stuff about them. I think you'll find, aside from really carrying on, but I think if you go to a hunt test or a field trial that day and you see a lot of dogs making some amount of noise, I think a lot of it's tolerated. No,
I do
for
too.
the most.
But I know we're going to take another question, but the one thing we didn't talk about is just, maybe it's totally unrelated, is the dog that barks on a whistle. And from time to time, you'll have a dog give a protest bark when you
Okay.
cast them.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing we're talking about? Or is that totally different to
I
you?
think that's different. I think it's a different
Okay.
frame of mind. I don't think that's a noise issue. I think that's a brainstem, something going on out there issue
Yeah.
that we got to deal with, about thinking about our way out of trouble. It's not a
Okay.
quiet, don't do that anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But go ahead.
We've got a couple comments about the obedience that you might do, or making the dog work hard before throwing marks to kind of get them in that frame of mind.
Mhm.
Seems to make the dog even more anxious and even more amped, and then a little noisy. So what might that person be doing wrong in that situation to
Okay.
be able to use this obedience before they get to work?
Okay, so if I got a puppy that I come out and I try to do the things that I think are going to help, and it gets more jacked up, well, I know one thing that's not going to happen. It's this dog's got hopefully a long career ahead of it. It's got a lot of things to learn. It's got a long path to follow. And one thing that's not going to be in its repertoire for a little while is how to figure out how to do marks. Because for a while, it's just not going to get marks. you're going to have to, if that dog is getting more jacked up, I would continue to put that dog out and I would continue to bring it out in the field and work it and keep putting it through its obedience or its yard work or its basics routine and engage it to that environment on a regular basis. But the dog's just not going to get marks. It's got to get settled down and start being a good citizen before it's going to come out and get
So
marks.
when I hear that comment, I think of this dog's protesting the fact that you're
Doing
adding
something.
structure. So, and maybe on the short term, he is going to be worse.
Yeah.
But if making noise and getting agitated gets you to change your standards, you're just rewarding the noise. So sometimes you just got to be a little more stubborn than they are.
You're going to have to be. Yep.
And the whole world of attrition is continue to do it till you actually wear them down. And it may just take a long time to wear them down.
Yeah, you might be out in the sun for a while. Pretty soon it's going to feel pretty good for them to sit down in the shade and they're going to want to take a break. But I've used that against me. It's just the heat and I'm tired and I don't want to work anymore. Oh, good, perfect. I thought you wanted to work. Oh, you want to sit down in the shade now and relax because you're hot? Perfect. Sit down and relax. You know, use their.
Sounds like my high school football coach.
Perfect. Sit down, Pat. Any other questions?
Have we gotten people tired? Or they?
No, got one more. Do you ever collect quits on a young dog for noise, or where do you draw that line?
Well, young dog. Are we talking a 10-month-old puppy?
Probably not. I'm trying to remember the earliest I've given up on one. I don't know if I've given up on a basics dog.
Yeah.
I don't think I've given up on a basics dog. So I'm going to say they've been over 12 months and I thought I can't get ahead of
I'm
this
not
yet.
sure I've ever given up for just noise.
No.
But usually I've given up when they have to have some redeeming qualities and I have to see. And if I've got noise problems, control problems,
Other things.
water blind problems, now, I mean, it's definitely a strike and it's a big one.
Yeah, not very often, but in being out in the world and doing some seminar stuff and seeing different dogs, you've seen cases that are really extreme.
Oh, yeah.
So those extreme cases are ones I haven't had too many of them. And maybe it's because most time I've been able to keep it from being that way or been able to get it manageable to some extent that I don't have that over the top beyond noise issue. But if you have that, yeah, you're gonna have a hard time.
But I'm going to give it years.
Yeah,
Or a year.
Yeah. I'm going to be well out of basics and feel like this dog's got a lot to learn and it's going to grow up and it's going to realize it's got a hard job to do. And sooner or later, its brain's going to kick in and I'm going to try hard.
You know, the bottom line though is, you know, typically you and I are not the owners. The final decision is this fun for you?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, and you know, if just doing all this is like, wait a minute, I did this to have fun and this isn't fun. That's reason enough to give up.
Bigger reason, the best reason,
Right.
usually.
Right.
What are your thoughts on bark collars for puppies that are not yet color conditioned?
I'm not a fan.
I don't
Not a
like,
fan.
I mean, bark collars are.
I'm not a big fan of them.
Bark
to begin
collars,
with.
period, right?
Yeah. And I've used them and I think at the right time with the right dog in the right place, it's a very effective tool, but I don't use them on a regular basis. I have used them in the past on a regular basis on older dogs. I don't on a puppy. I don't on a dog that's pre-collar conditioned. A puppy that little and tender, I got to do my best to be a good puppy racer and try to use the newspaper a little bit and take them for another longer walk.
You know, I know at Handrum there later, we actually put cameras, you know, where we could actually identify the dogs and we had a live collar on them. So we could actually correct at the right time instead of hope that the collar worked at the right time and went off at the right time, because some of those are just erratic. Sometimes they go off when you don't want them to. And some of those dogs learn if they bark long enough,
They'll bark through them, or
they're going to bark through them and then they don't work anymore. So they just bark more.
Yeah, they're a difficult tool. They have to be, that's a tool. If you're going to use that tool, it has to be kind of trained into them like any other course of training. Don't just throw it on and say, I'll see you at the end of the weekend.
Yeah.
You're going to have trouble.
Those are all the questions. Thank you, guys.
You wore out?
It's fun talking about it.
We tried to play our music and shut everything down.
I know, it was great.
I thought Kenny Chesney was gonna come hang with us, but I guess, I don't know,
Maybe everybody.
you know, I hope that I know a bunch of the folks maybe missed a little bit of it, but hopefully we recap that and
It's a
hopefully we
big-
got back on track.
It's a
And
big expansive subject with a never ending way of
yeah,
going in different directions on different problems, but it's.
I
fun.
told you this was gonna be fun.
I enjoyed it. I was nervous. But
Well, it's good. Hey, buddy,
thank you, sir.
one of the great guys right here.
Appreciate
And and then tell you, all that brain power, all that experience you're putting into, well, again, like I said, going back and finding a better way to get these dogs started, so you don't have to be doing this 2.5 years from now.
Make the next.
I think
guy's
it's
job
fabulous.
easier. Yeah.
You know, and you know, you've taken your business a little different direction and you focused on these, and I can tell you're having fun doing it, and I know you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Pat.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Well, good night, everybody, and thank you. Thank you once again, Purina, for all your support, and everybody at home. You know, I know there should be a video recording coming out, and I know Robin will be on top of that. And but once again, I can't thank you enough. Remember, our next Expert Insight Forum deal is September 13th. Judy Aycock. I'm pretty sure there's some seats still available if anybody's interested. Judy is, you know, if you haven't heard her talk, she's one of the most intellectual, articulate people you ever meet, and arguably one of the top couple amateurs the sport has ever seen. So, and the first woman to ever win an Open National Championship. So,
Good stuff.
all right. Well, thanks again.
Remember John 3:16. God bless.
Hey, buddy, I'm loving it. Good night, everybody, and thank you. And happy training.